Hello everyone, warm greetings to all. Hope everyone is doing well. I, Dr. Shikha Dhiman, Assistant Professor, Department of Laws, Guru Nanak Dev University, Amritsar, is here in front of you to present a lecture on the topic Women's Reservation in Indian Parliament for Gender Equality. Let's start with an introduction. Gender equality will only be reached if we are able to empower women. Michael Bellet said, "Women representation in politics is a vital step towards gender equality. Since the ancient times, women have faced the discrimination due to patriarchal notion of the Indian society. Gender inequality is often seen as the moral and ethical problem. The makers of the Constitution were keen to address the issues of gender discrimination and have made several provisions for the upliftment of the women. Article 14 of the Constitution of India guarantees the right to equality for all of its citizens. Article 15 prohibits the state from discriminating the citizens on the ground of caste, religion, gender or color. Despite these provisions, many of the legislations have failed to conform to these provisions of the Constitution. In India, women's representation in politics was never considered as a serious lacuna. They were not given equal rights as of their male counterparts. The Constitution of India has promised a legal equality to the women. The fundamental right to equality under Article 14 to 18, equal right to vote has brought women at par with men in de jure sense. The de facto situation is women do cast their votes and participate in agitations, movements, but they still lag behind in positions of power and decision making. India ranked 141 among 193 countries as per report of Inter-Parliamentary Union 2016. Women, who form almost 50% of the population, are not even 10% in the parliament. The number of women MPs has increased from 5% in the first Lok Sabha to 15% in the 17th Lok Sabha, but the number continues to be quite low. A 2003 study about the effect of reservation for women in panchayats showed that women elected under the reservation policy invest more in the public goods closely linked to the women's concern. The Constitutional 106th Amendment Act 2023 provides 1/3 reservation for women in Lok Sabha and state legislative assemblies. Now let's discuss the historical background for reservation of women politics in India. The debate on reservation in India is not new. It goes back to the Indian national movement. It can be seen that since there was acceptance of the idea as a means of achieving social equality, in 1931, letter was written to British Prime Minister by leading women leaders like Sarojini Naidu, Mrs. Nawaz. It stated unequivocally that we look upon nominations, reservations of seats and the co-option in any sphere of activity as a pernicious and humiliating system which must run counter to all real progress. Women actively participated in the Indian national movement, but after independence, they lagged behind in public sphere and political representation. Even during the framing of Indian Constitution, some women members of Constituent Assembly has opposed the reservations for women. In 1975, the Committee on Status of Women in India commented on declining political representation of women in India. Though majority women in the community were against reservations in the legislative bodies, but all members agreed on reservation for women in local bodies. In the committee, some members were of the view that separate seats for women will be weaken the position of women. They expressed the fear of this provision will help only upper class and the caste women. The National Perspective Plan of 1988-2000 also recommended 30% reservation for women in all elected bodies. This document was not clear whether this reservation is through nomination or election. Women organizations opposed reservations for women by nomination. The Janata government of Karnataka in the year 1990, Maharashtra government of Congress won under chief ministership of Sharad Pawar in the year 1990, Kerala in 1991 announced and accepted the reservation of women at local bodies ranging from 25% to 30%. These initiatives by many state governments been seen as political maneuver to outnumber the opposition and their strongholds. Women's organization along with many active women politicians supported such reservation at local levels. Following in this line, in 1992, Parliament enacted 73rd and 74th Amendment to the Indian Constitution. Article 243D and 243T provides for the reservation in Panchayati Raj and in urban local bodies respectively. With these amendments, it is mandatory for all state governments to reserve 1/3 seats, including the office of the chairpersons, for women in all the local bodies. Within this, 33% reservation seats have been reserved for the scheduled caste or scheduled tribes women. The Act also authorizes the legislature of a state to make provisions for reservation of seats in the favor of backward classes. Panchayat Raj being the state subject, many states have extended reservations up to 50% to women. The states of Andhra Pradesh, Bihar, Chhattisgarh, Himachal Pradesh, Maharashtra, Odisha, Rajasthan, Tripura and Uttarakhand have provided 50% reservation for women at local bodies election. On 12th September 1996, the Government of India tabled 81st Constitutional Amendment Bill, which sought to reserve 1/3 of the seats for women in Parliament and state legislatures. However, many MPs, especially those belonging to the OBCs, opposed this bill. Consequently, the bill was sent to a select committee of Parliament headed by Geeta Mukherjee. The committee had 21 members from Lok Sabha and 10 from the Rajya Sabha. The panel also noted that the seats for the women had been reserved within the SC/ST quotas, but there was no such benefit for OBC women because there is no provision for OBC reservation. In May 2013, the Ministry of Women and Child Development constituted a committee on the status of women, which recommended ensuring at least 50% reservation of seats for the women in local bodies, state legislative assemblies, parliament, ministerial levels and all decision-making bodies of the government. In 2015, the report on the status of women in India recommended reserving at least 50% seats for women in local bodies, state legislative assemblies, parliament, ministerial levels and all the decision-making bodies of the government. Now, let us discuss the legislative status for women's reservation in Parliament. The Constitution 128th Amendment Bill 2023 has been unanimously passed from the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha. The bill seeks to reserve 1/3 of the total number of seats in the Lok Sabha and state legislative assemblies for the women. The bill provided for inserting Article 330A to the Constitution, which borrows from the provisions of Article 330, which further provides for the reservation of seats to SCs and STs in the Lok Sabha. The bill provided that reserved seats for women may be allotted by rotation to different constituencies in the states or union territories. In the seats reserved for SC/STs, the bill sought to provide 1/3 of the seats to be reserved for women on the rotational basis. In addition to this, the bill introduces Article 332A, which mandates the reservation of seats for women in every state legislative assembly. Additionally, 1/3 of the seats reserved for scheduled castes and scheduled tribes must be allocated for women, and 1/3 of the total seats filled through the direct elections to be legislative assemblies shall also be reserved for the women. Another article is 239AA to the Constitution that guarantees the special status to the Union Territory of Delhi as national capital with regard to its administrative and legislative functioning. Article 239AA clause 2 subclause B was amended by the bill accordingly to add that the laws framed by the Parliament shall apply to the National Capital Territory of Delhi. Article 334A provides that the reservation will be effective after the census conducted after the commencement of this bill has been published. Based on the census, delimitation will be undertaken to reserve the seats for women. The reservation will be provided for a period of 15 years. However, it shall continue till such date as determined by a law made by the Parliament. Now, let us talk over the features of 103rd Constitutional Amendment Act. The Constitution 106th Amendment Act 2023 reserves 1/3 of all seats for women in the Lok Sabha, state legislative assemblies and the legislative assemblies of the National Capital Territory of Delhi, including those reserved for the SCs and STs. The reservation will be effective after the publication of the census conducted following the Act's commencement and endure for a 15-year period with potential extension determined by parliamentary action. The rotation of seats allocated for women will be governed by parliamentary legislation after each delimitation process. Currently, around 15% of the total members of the 17th Lok Sabha 2019 to 2024 are women, while in the state legislative assemblies, women on average constitutes 9% of the total members. The main features of the Act are as follows. Number 1. New clauses have been inserted in Article 239AA that focuses on the reservation of the seats for women in Legislative Assembly for Delhi. Next, 1/3 of the seats for scheduled castes will be reserved for women. Another feature, 1/3 of the seats that have to be filled by direct election will be reserved for women, including the women belonging to scheduled castes. Next feature, Article 330A has been inserted, which provides for the reservation of seats for women in the Lok Sabha or House of People. 1/3 of the total number of the seats reserved under Article 330 Clause 2 will be reserved for women belonging to scheduled castes or scheduled tribes. Another feature, 1/3 of the seats that have to be filled by direct election will be reserved for women, including the number of seats reserved for women belonging to scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. Another, we have Article 332A that has been inserted, which mentions that the reservation of seats for women in every legislative assembly of every state. Another feature, 1/3 of the total number of the seats reserved under Article 332 Clause 3 will be reserved for women belonging to scheduled castes or scheduled tribes. Another, 1/3 of the seats that have to be filled by direct election will be reserved for women, including the number of seats reserved for women belonging to scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. Next, rotation of seats will be exercised after delimitation exercise. The Act will expire after a period of 15 years from the date of its commencement. Now, let us discuss the advantages of ensuring reservation for women in politics. The reservation for the women in parliament and state legislative assemblies ensures the women's right to self-representation and self-determination. If a group is not represented proportionally in a political system, its ability to influence the policy making is limited. The Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women provides that discrimination against women must be eliminated in political and public life. The various surveys do indicate that women representatives from Panchayati Raj have worked commendable in the development and overall well-being of society in villages, and many of them would definitely want to work on a larger scale. However, they face various challenges which are already prevalent in the country's political structure. It can ensure the diversity among the parliament and state legislature. A more diverse legislature that includes a significant number of women can bring a broader range of perspectives to the decision-making process. This diversity can lead to better policy formulation and governance. In addition to this, empowerment of women is guaranteed. Women's reservation in politics empowers the women at various levels. It not only encourages more women to participate in politics, but also inspires the women to take on leadership roles in other sectors. Women in politics often prioritize and advocate for issues that directly affect women, such as gender-based violence, women's health, education and economic empowerment. Their presence can lead to the prioritization of these issues in policy discussions. It is assumed that when women enter the politics and in position of power, they will take up women's issues and they will also affect changes in the party and local bodies. Studies undertaken from 1990s onwards suggest that most of the women who contest elections are from elite families with political clouts. Male politicians are reluctant to leave their power, so when the post is reserved for women, they have tried to keep it within their family by providing candidate like daughter, wife, daughter-in-law, etc. Thus, many a times women representatives do not act independently but work as per wishes of their male relatives. In such a case, many a times women organizations and NGOs working on local governance have intervened and have assured due rights to women from backward classes. Though such incidents are still happening, there is bright side this as well. Many studies have undertaken on women reservation after landmark amendments have shown positive impact of it on the programs undertaken by villages leading to women empowerment. Women representatives and decision makers have projected their own experiences, problems and concerns, their needs and priorities. Their needs are often fall outside of the traditional politics. Women reservations have given an opportunity to visualize their concerns. Proving true to this assumption, women decision makers have worked for water supply, sanitation, education, lighting on the streets rather than roads, buses and beautification issues taken up by men. Women-led villages have brought community toilets, smokeless chullas, extra classrooms, water taps. Panchayats in West Bengal have taken up the issues of dowry, literacy, health campaigns and also the demand for equal land rights. In Rajasthan, women representatives have supported women to leave an abusive husband. In Maharashtra, panchayats have started a project on waste recycling. Besides these visible outcomes of development, women presence has contributed towards increased self-esteem, confidence, changing relations at family level, and also changing attitude towards daughters. For women, these reservations have opened up process in which they sit on chair in public meetings, or they sign or write their names, or they have enhanced their mobility. These are empowering things and have potential for transformation. The biggest success is that many women representatives would like to stand for the second term. They are also willing to contest the seats even from general constituency. They have also planned to move in higher rungs of power. Today, women moving in higher ladder are less in numbers, but we hope to see more such faces in the future. Despite of the equality status and empowerment of the women, some oppose the women's reservation in parliament and legislative assemblies. They are of the view that women are not a homogeneous community like a caste group. Therefore, the same arguments made for caste-based reservations cannot be made for the women. Reserving seats for women is opposed by some who claim that doing so violates the Constitution's guarantee of equality. Reservation would allow the preferential claims of the women. They would not be competing on the merits. As a result, the effective implementation will be decreased in the society. Now, what sort of reforms can be there for the effective representation of women? There has to be strengthening the independent decision making, and for that we have to establish an independent monitoring system or committees that explicitly prohibits family members from influencing the decision making process of women representatives. It can be implemented by reducing the influence of patriarchal mindset. Another way is increasing the awareness in education. Creating awareness among the women about their rights and the importance of their participation in politics is very essential. Educational programs and awareness campaigns can also help to increase women's political participation. Another way is addressing the gender-based violence and harassment. Gender-based violence and harassment are major obstacles to women's participation in politics. Addressing these issues through policy and legal measures can create a safer and more supportive environment for women in politics. Another way out is reforms in the electoral process. Reforms such as introducing proportional representation and preferential voting systems can help to increase the women's representation in politics by ensuring that more women get elected. These are only a few approaches to increase the number of women in Indian politics. To effect the long-lasting change, a multifaceted strategy addressing multiple challenges is the need of an hour. Let's conclude the topic. Indian society is a male-dominating society where women are considered as an inferior to their male counterparts. Since the last few decades, the reservation has boosted in the growth of inferior sections of the society, but the representation of the women in politics is still lagging behind. The 106th Amendment Act will lead to the increased representation of women in parliament and state legislatures, which will ultimately lead to the women empowerment in its true sense. Women's reservation in the lower house of the Indian Parliament is gradually increasing over the years. The Nari Shakti Vandan Act 2023 is a historic beginning for India towards empowering the women and one step towards strengthening its democracy. It is very essential to include more women in the policy making and decision making at both central and state levels and contribute towards the effective governance of the country with their active participation. In addition to this, it will also help in achieving the Sustainable Development Goal, which talks about achieving gender equality. Thank you everyone for your time and attention. We have discussed the entire concept in a short time, and I hope that all the listeners have understood the topic. Stay safe, stay healthy. God bless you all. Take care.